Hi everyone, welcome to today's lecture. Again, we're going to see attacking games, and we will start with a game that everybody should know, a game played between Rotlewi and Rubinstein. It's been called the Immortal game. Actually, it's been called Rubinstein's Immortal game because that's a fabulous game with a series of sacrifices and combinations. So let's have a look. It started in a quiet way, actually in a very symmetrical position. So here we have a totally symmetrical position. Here white probably made the first questionable decision to take on c5 right away. Usually you rather wait for black to develop the f8 bishop and then you take on c5 so that black loses a tempo, first playing bishop e7 for example, and then taking on c5. However, of course, if you do not take on c5, you give an extra option to play c takes d4. That's probably what white wanted to avoid, so he played d takes c5. And now a3, he wants to push b4. So far this is very reasonable for white. Black played a6, b4, bishop d6. So a6 will prove useful. I don't think knight b5 would be a real threat, but a6 is anyway useful because at some point black would like to take on c4 and play b5, just like white did. So bishop b2 was played, castle. And here white played a very weird move. He played queen d2. In that sort of position you never put the queen there. It would have been more normal to, I think the most natural way to play would have been to take, force black an isolated pawn, and then play bishop e2, short castle, with a very normal position. And anything would have been better than queen d2, I mean also bishop d3. It's true that then black can take on c4, and compared to white, black has won a tempo because he has waited for white to develop the bishop. So that's why I think this was definitely the most natural way to play. But queen d2 was really weird. So of course I did not mention, but the pawn is not possible to take because of knight takes and bishop b4, and then queen takes d5, and the queen is lost. So the queen is lost here. But queen d2 is a really strong square for the queen. I mean, the only idea I could see behind this move would be to play long castle, but long castle when you have your pawns on b4 and c4, that cannot be serious, and white actually didn't do it in the game. Black played queen e7. He wants to go rook d8 and take advantage of the queen on d2, which will have to move again. Now it would be possible for white to take the pawn, but even there, so now bishop b4 check would not win the queen, but there black would have a very serious lead in development, and definitely great compensation for the pawn. Here white played bishop d3, black took on c4, played b5, rook d8. Now white is having problems on the d file, so he moved his queen to e2, bishop b7, short castle. And now have a look at the position. We have a completely symmetrical position, except that black already has his rook on d8, and it is also black to move, which means that white really went wrong, because normally if the position is symmetrical, white should have an extra tempo, and there is 2 tempi down. So white definitely went wrong, but still the position looks very solid, and black should make a good decision here. As if you allow some trades, let's say with knight e4 and so on, white will probably manage to equalize anyway. Black played knight e5, which is a very good move, because the knight on c6 was anyway blocking the diagonal of the bishop, and the knight on f3 is a very important piece to develop, to to defend the white king. After the exchange on e5, you can see that there is no piece on any of these three columns, and there is no piece in front of the white king. So black here already have threats like queen d6 or queen c7, attacking here or there, and attacking on h2, attacking h2 as well. Or first bishop takes h2, and then a check on d6 or a check on d6 and take the bishop on d3. So to avoid this, white played f4. Now where would you retract your bishop? Why?
I don't want to get in the way of the D file, and I want to go to B8 because that disconnects my rugs. But I also like the idea of B6 at some point.
Exactly. So bishop c7 is a very good move, because on white is gonna play e4 on the next move. I mean, f4, if you don't play f4 next, does not make any sense. So e4 has to be played, and the bishop will be doing excellent on b6. Then the bishop on b2 will be extremely misplaced. It would be much better on e3. Here black could have given a check, but he first played rook ac8. White pushed e5, so he's opening the diagonal of the light squared bishop, but on the other hand, he's closing the diagonal of the dark squared bishop. Black gave a check, king h1, and now already if you have a look at the position, the two rooks, the two open files, the bishops are on the two best possible diagonals. It's difficult to dream of a better setup for black. So black is definitely doing very well here, but he has one knight move that is particularly strong here. Can you find it? Yes, knight g4 is a very strong move. Going in the direction of the white king, black is already threatening queen h4, and if h3 then queen takes h3 mate. He's also threatening knight takes h2 followed by queen h4. He's also threatening to enter with a knight. If white takes the bishop, then after rook d3, that's quite a disaster. This is hanging, and rook d2 is also a threat, attacking the bishop and the pawn on g2. This is just dead lost for white. Taking on h7 first takes a pawn, but it actually only makes things worse because the rook immediately comes to d2. White took a pawn on h7, and so what? The rook is already on d2, the game is just over. If white tries to go knight e4, for example, to cut the diagonal, well, first of all, knight takes h2 would probably be reasonable, but best should probably be rook takes d3, with this typical idea, queen h4, queen g3, forcing white to take to avoid checkmate on h2, and queen h4 mate. So white decided to play bishop e4. Now that would be a very easy win for black. Knight takes h2, so the knight cannot be taken because of queen h4 mate. And if bishop b7, of course not queen b7, because then white would take the knight on h2, but first knight takes f1, threatening mate on h4, threatening a fork on g3. At the very worst, next you take back on b7 and you have an extra exchange and an extra pawn. So that's completely game over. But Rubinstein apparently that day really wanted to get a brilliancy prize, and he played queen h4. So here white played g3 to defend h2 with a queen. h3 was the alternative. And then how could black continue? A bit similarly to lines we have seen just a minute ago. Not queen g3, because now I can take with a queen on g4.
Rook d3.
Bishop c3. There is a bishop in e4. So in the chat, Imani tried to go even further. The line continues. Queen takes g4 in the line you're giving. Try to go even further.
Knight f2.
So knight f2 would not be a bad move, but king h2, I don't really see a forced win there.
Well, rook takes c3.
So rook takes c3, queen takes g4, for example, or rook, actually no, rook takes c3. Let me play bishop takes c3.
Then bishop takes e4.
Queen takes g4.
Okay, so I guess it's not good. Yeah.
No, that actually works. Takes, bishop takes e4. Now this is obviously a checkmate with the same ideas we've seen before. And if queen takes g4, takes, now we have this very important move rook d3. And we have a double strat, which is to take the bishop and to checkmate on h3. So this wins for black. We will have two very strong bishops for a rook. After rook takes e3, if bishop b7, then this is an immediate mate. And if queen takes g4, then this is very strong. Takes, check. Rook d2, collecting the bishop on g. Actually, no, you don't even have to collect the bishop, you can checkmate your opponent. So h3 loses to rook takes e3. So in the game, white decided to go g3. And now how to continue with black? What was Rubinstein's idea in this position? Because you may wonder what he is doing. Now the queen is hanging, h2 is protected, the bishop on b7 is hanging. Of course you can always trade on e4, but that's not really what you want. So what was Rubinstein's idea in this position? Here started the really incredibly brilliant part of the game. Rook d2, I can take it.
Queen to h2.
Queen h2, queen h2.
Knight h2.
Then bishop takes b7.
Rook to d2.
Okay, you gave many pieces, so bishop takes c8. I've collected many pieces with white, and so far you have only collected one pawn.
I mean, I would pick up the. Oh, you said c8. Bishop's still on b2. I can take that with rook, right?
Yeah, but you only, I mean, takes, I take. So white has an extra piece. If you go rook d2, now it's a piece and a rook. You get a piece back, but you're still a rook down here. Not so you have a little bit of counterplay, but a rook is a little bit too much. I mean, unless you have something concrete, of course. Actually, it could almost work. Well, I mean, actually, I'm wondering. That might work, actually. Here knight g4, and I don't see how to prevent rook h2 mate. So maybe I shouldn't take on c8. Maybe I should play something else. But I don't know what. So that might work as well. Well, I'm curious to check it. No, apparently it doesn't. This loses. I was right on this, but here, for example, knight e4, just to get rid of the rook, and now if knight g4, there will be knight c5 always, and the king can escape to g1. So this is not working. So here, black plays rook takes c3, sacrificing his queen. White has to accept the gift, I mean to take the queen. If he just captures the rook, this is easy, bishop takes, and then there'll be checkmate on h2. This is not really a move either, because now black has an extra pawn and a winning attack. So here there is no need for concrete calculation because black has the attack and an extra pawn. So critical is to take the queen, and now how does black continue? Rook to e3, I would just take on e3 and then take on b7, and again I would stay with extra material. But you're right that you need, the key is to eliminate this bishop on e4, but it should not cost you your lightweight bishop. Because you're going to, you want to kill white on this diagonal, and rook e3, you allow queen takes e3, bishop takes b7, and the attack is over. So here the crushing move with the same idea as rook e3 is rook d2. Now if white, for example, takes here, this is just over. Now black can take everything, bishop takes f3. This might be even stronger with forced checkmate. This is just over, threatening bishop takes e4, but also threatening rook takes h2 mate. This is also the same, threatening rook takes b2, but also rook takes h2 mate. So queen takes d2 has to be played. Of course, bishop takes e4, queen g2, and now the final blow.
H3.
Exactly, because if you rook h3, because if you take on g2 and give a check, then okay, king g3 attacking the knight and the position is unclear. But rook h3, and it's a forced checkmate on h2. White can even play rook f3, bishop f3, and next is rook takes h2 checkmate. So this way ended the game, and look at the black pieces. Well, first of all, look at the material balance, how many pieces black sacrificed, but all of the black pieces are playing a crucial role in the attack. All of the black pieces are on the perfect square so that the combination works. So this game is really a must now. That's one of the most famous attacking games of all time. So that was Rotlewi Rubinstein, played in 1907. So now let's see another game played between Topalov and Kasparov in 1996. So the game was a Najdorf, typical Kasparov, and Topalov went for the Sicilian variation, bishop c4, which was still popular at the time. Nowadays it is not being played very often. e6, bishop b3, knight d7, this is one of the main lines. Black wants knight c5 and wants to take the bishop. f4, knight c5. Here queen f3 is a possible move, and the alternative is short castle, sacrificing the pawn on e4. Of course, black does not have to take it, but if he doesn't take it, then white is happy that he hasn't wasted a tempo playing queen f3. So in the game, Kasparov took the pawn, which is actually probably the best move objectively. Takes f5. Now black cannot afford opening the position. His king is in the center. He needs to close it with e5. Queen h5. There Kasparov played queen e7, which was supposed to be the right move at the time. Then chess engines showed that d5 is probably a little safer. Then theory continues with rook e1, bishop c5, because if takes, then rook takes e4. You cannot take the rook because of queen f7 mate, and this is problematic for black. But bishop c5, rook takes c4, and now two choices. One is to take on d4, and for example here white can sacrifice, and he has a bishop pair, he has nice compensation, but black plays f6. White has compensation, but probably not for an advantage. Actually, Topalov lost the game in this position later. And an alternative after rook takes e4 is to castle. As in case of rook takes e5, there will be bishop takes d4 check. Then rook g4, king h1, e4. White has some attack, black has an extra pawn, the position is a complete mess. But this is probably the safest for black, d5. I mean, if you know your opening, if you know what to do, then d5 is just okay for black. But at the time, of course, chess engines were not telling you immediately what the right move is. So Kasparov played queen e7. Topalov went back to f3. ed4, rook e1, the game is basically over. Then rook takes e4, and with such a king in the center, black's position is a disaster. So Kasparov played knight c5, and he wants to eliminate this bishop b3, which is always the most important piece for white in the Sozin. I mean, there is a reason why you play bishop c4, bishop b3. You want the bishop on the diagonal, and especially now that f5 has been played and black has played e5, the diagonal is completely open, so black is dreaming of eliminating his bishop. Here Topalov found a way to keep the bishop alive. So how did he manage this? Because the knight on d4 is hanging and knight takes b3 is being threatened. So what did Topalov play here? f6 would not do much. I would just take with the pawn. So knight c6, and if queen c7, exactly. Topalov went knight c6, so if pawn takes, then queen takes, and the rook on a8 is lost. Kasparov moved his queen, and now Topalov played bishop d5. It could be tempting to go knight b4 to put the knight on d5, but that would just, without the bishop, white would have no attack. First of all, queen takes b3 would be forced, otherwise queen b6 check is gonna win the b4 knight. And now, for example, b5, then queen c6, bishop b7, and white probably has some compensation because the knight on d5 is nice, but is definitely not better. So bishop d5, that's the key move. Kasparov played a5. He wants to trap the knight on c6. For example, if bishop d7, now knight b4, and black has a very pleasant position. If bishop e7, for example, then queen h5. If castles, then rook f3, and white already has a winning attack. For example, queen c8, trying to be smart, so that after rook h3, black can take the pawn on f5. Here bishop h6 would be a fantastic attacking move. and just bring the rook to f1, protect f5, and the rook is gonna come to h3. That's gonna be a checkmate very soon. So actually rook f8 would be the only move here, and obviously white would have fantastic compensation. If instead of bishop e7, black tries to be smart with queen b6, attacking the knight and threatening a discovery check onto the long diagonal, there bishop f7 would win the game. Takes, knight d5, the queen goes somewhere, check, the king has to go to g8, f6, then f7, and the game is over. So bishop d7 is quite dubious, a5 is probably best and is also quite human. I mean, the knight is a bit weird on c6, you want to trap it. Here Topalov played bishop g5, simply making an extra square available for his knight. And now Kasparov blundered, he played rook a6. Bishop d7 would have been critical. So after bishop d7, what do you think white should play?
Bishop takes f7.
So bishop takes f7 is very tempting, and it's been played by a French grandmaster, Jean-Marc de Grave. He took on f7, but actually after king takes, queen h5 and f6, just like we've seen before, after bishop e8 he had to resign, because black is controlling the f7 square enough times, and black is losing, and white has lost a lot of material and is also going to lose his c6 knight. So bishop f7 might have been what Kasparov was afraid of, but it is not working. Critical here would be knight e7. And after knight e7, there is only one way for black not to lose the game. White is now threatening to take on f7, obviously, and play queen h5, and the king cannot even escape to g8. Black needs to take. If he plays f6, then queen h5, king takes, bishop f6. It's a smart move order, because if you start like this, then black can go king c8. So you start bishop f6, obviously king takes, the king is gonna get mated, queen f7 should also be a mate, but this is even quicker. I mean, mate is coming very soon. Pawn takes, then queen f7, and you're taking the rook, you push your f-pawn, and white is simply winning here. So bishop e7 would be critical, and now bishop e7. And if you take my bishop, I'll play f6, and I'm going to demolish you. So you can't touch the bishop. White wants to play f6 and keep a very strong bishop on e7. So it is quite tempting for black to play f6 here, trapping the bishop, preventing white from playing f6. But queen g4 seems pretty strong, as there is no way to defend the g7 pawn. And now black would only have one move to save the game. Can you find it? So g6 wouldn't be good. I would play, well, first of all, I could also have gone queen g3, then there would be no pin of the f pawn. But g6, I could take on f6, or even stronger might be to take queen h4, for example. And if you take the bishop, then takes, threatening to take on f7. If you put the rook on f8, then I push g7, and you're just lost. Bishop f5, I would go queen takes g7.
Queen takes e7.
Then I take your rook, and I have a big material advantage. So here, the only move for black to survive is bishop e6. The idea being that if you take on g7, black is able to go rook g8. And then black wins, because it's gonna take on d5 next. So okay, you can take on e6, queen e7, white has compensation, but black is very solid here. This is just unclear.
Why doesn't rook g8 work first?
Because my bishop on d5 is
Okay.
controlling g8. So queen g4, and this is the only move, and then black is more or less okay. That would have been the critical line after bishop d7, but instead Kasparov played rook a6, and he just allowed Topalov to play knight d8 and then knight f7, attacking the rook. And although we've seen plenty of sacrifices, actually white is only a pawn down here, because black rejected all sacrifices. So rook g8. Now Topalov simply played bishop e3. Black is completely paralyzed. Kasparov played g6, knight g5, and what is very impressive, I like to call this game the knight dance, because look at the maneuver that the knight has done. The g1 knight is now on g5, so you would expect it to go to f3 and then to g5, but it has actually gone through d4, c6, d8, f7, and then g5. All this in just 20 moves. So that's not something you see every day. So white just wants to capture the rook on g8. Black played rook g7, that would be actually bishop, there you would not even take on g8, this would be even stronger, with the idea that if the rook moves you check, and then queen f6, or even bishop g5, if bishop e7 then f8, and it's game over. So in the game black played rook g7, takes, bishop f7, black sacrificed his queen. They played this position where black only has two bishops or the queen, so it took Topalov some time to win the game, like another 25 moves or something, actually more, took him another 40 moves. So Kasparov gave it all to try to hold this position, but obviously white has an extra queen, and in the end he won the game. So that was Topalov Kasparov. I think one of Topalov's brilliances, especially with this knight maneuver, which I love, the knight going through d8 to g5. Okay, let's see a third game. So white was Loek van Wely, and with black was playing Peter Axe. So Van Vliet was the stronger player with a rating close to 2700 and black's rating was close to 2600. I used the word demolish a little bit earlier in this lecture, and I see that in the chat people liked it very much because they are using it all the time. Okay, so the opening was an Nimzo-Indian, pretty normal opening. Castle, knight, bishop d3, white took, knight e2, that's a standard setup. Rook e8, castle, the bishop came back to d6. We have a normal position, but white should always be careful. If the knight is on f3, his king is very safe. With the knight on e2, white has to be careful. I mean, he always has to watch out for bishop takes h2, this kind of thing. But white played h3 very calmly, because after bishop h2, knight g4, of course not king g1, because that would be a disaster. White would have to go rook e1, and after queen takes f2, not just black would have at least a perpetual check with queen h4, but most likely the rook would join the attack, and that should be winning for black. But bishop h2, the white king would go to g3, and without dark squared bishop, it would be very difficult to checkmate. For example, h5, f4, and the white king is going to hide on f3, and this is not working for black, simply. So Van Vliet was not afraid of bishop h2, he decided to play h3. He could have played h3, just avoiding any tactics, but okay, he calculated that bishop h2 was not a problem, so he played h3, preparing to play b4 and play a positional game on the queen side. But there black played knight g4. After what, the most natural move is h3. Probably objectively speaking, g3 would have been better, but it's making many holes on the light squares. That's positionally very ugly. So h3 is pretty logical. And now how do you think Peter Axe continued? So queen h4 I could have played, but it's not threatening very much. Probably just knight takes d5. But queen h4 is a possibility. Instead, black found something stronger. So knight h2, rook e1,
Knight f3,
pawn takes f3,
queen to g5.
queen g5, king h1. If I play knight g, okay, king f1 is bishop takes h3, checkmate. This is not very good either. For example, that is a checkmate. So king h1, and now black played queen h4. There's quite a few threats. f2 is hanging, h3 is hanging. Obviously the biggest threat is to take on h3. So white played knight f4, which is pretty much the only move. If knight g1, just bishop takes h3, and there is no way white can defend this. Of course, if he takes, you do not give a check with the queen, you first check with the bishop, and you have this typical idea of checkmate on f2. If white plays a random move, let's say he takes a pawn on d5, he's very greedy, he wants to take a pawn, then takes, and again we have the same idea. So white needs to block the diagonal of the d6 bishop. That's why he played knight f4. Black played bishop takes h3. This is not a move because of queen g5 check, then next you take on f4 and you threaten queen g2 mate. So white played knight cd5, which is very risky, but it is not so easy for black to find the best continuation. So now how did black play? You have to bring another piece to the attack. Exactly, rook e6, very good. If the rook reaches h6, then it's game over, so white has to take it. And now black has a fantastic way to win the game. There is one line which is actually even more fantastic, but unfortunately it does not win the game. There is only one concrete win here. And this is probably one of the last moves you would think of. At first, at least. So did somebody find in the chat? No, not yet.
Bishop g3.
Bishop g3, and if I take it? No, not bishop g3. So bishop g4 is tempting because you can win the queen, but white has many pieces for the queen. Here, for example, knight takes on c7, or even just knight f4, and white has many pieces for the queen. This position is actually very unclear. If you count the pieces, even after a simple knight f4, attacking the queen has to go, then the bishop is lost. If you count the pieces, white has 2 pieces and a rook for the queen, Of course, black can take on f2, he has some pawns, some initiative, but this is not so clear. Another thing which is not so clear is bishop takes e6. I would like to hide this from... I mean, this is also possible. Black is white has an extra exchange, but obviously black has compensation. But this is also not so clear. This is a mistake because white will just play... black is returning mate on g2 and on h2. But by playing knight f4, white prevents everything, and the black attack just fails. A very nice line which usually my students propose when I give them this position is bishop f1 and a very cute move bishop e2. Because if you take my bishop with whatever piece, I will go queen h2 and queen h1 mate. This is extremely cute, but unfortunately again, just knight f4 and takes. White has many pieces for the queen, and this is also not so clear. So it doesn't leave that many options. What else? What could be the win for black? Yes, I see bishop f1, bishop e2 has now been proposed in the chat, but it is, well, it's definitely, it would be much better if bishop f1, bishop e2 would work, because that would be really, really beautiful, but it is not a concrete win. Here black has a forced checkmate. Queen takes f2, as I said, just knight f4 prevents everything. So Ariane in the chat, can you give me the full continuation, not just the first move? Okay, so here the win is bishop f5 check, which is, at least, let's say in a blitz game, that would be the last move I would think of. I would consider bishop g4, I would consider taking on e6 and taking on d5. If I saw this bishop f1, bishop e2, I would also consider and most likely play it because it looks so nice. But bishop f5 is not the first move you think of, because it doesn't look like it's doing much. But actually after king g1, queen h2, king f1, now black has a killer, which is bishop to g3. And the bishop on f5 turns out to be the decisive piece, because if white wants to prevent a checkmate on f2, okay, of course pawn takes g3 is bishop h3 mate, and if white plays any move to prevent a checkmate on f2, then black will take on d3, the black queen will have to take, and a checkmate will follow. So here there is no defense. After bishop g3, white had to resign. in just 18 moves. So not every day a player rated 2700 loses with white in just 18 moves. Okay, so here we are for today. Do you have any questions? Okay, then I will see you, I think, tomorrow same time, if I'm not wrong.
Not
So-
quite. Thursday.
Thursday for sure. Wednesday, I'm not sure.
There's nothing going on with the GM tomorrow.
Okay, so I will see you on Thursday same time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments. And well, see you in 2 days. Have a good evening, everyone.
It's time for the return of the Grand Chess Tour, featuring the world's best players in some of the most unique places across the globe. Romania, Poland, Croatia, and the United States. Join us in May as we kick off the 2022 tour in Romania, and then immediately followed by Poland. This is your chance to see the best players in the world's greatest game. Follow all of the action live at grandchesstour.org. Chess, the smartest game on earth.